Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Geoff with Fluent American checking in. Again, talking more about IELTS today. Okay. We won't be using a document, but for some of the highlights of what we're going to talk about, I will definitely post them in the chat box so you can reference them at any time. And of course, if you ever have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box as well. Our focus today is going to be talking about IELTS Task 2, especially writing. This is especially for students or candidates who take the test and they always get a 5 or they always get a 6. Maybe they've taken it 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times. I remember when I was an examiner, sometimes we would see the same student 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. So I definitely know this happens. I get it. So we're going to be really focusing on why is this happening? What are some of the things we can do to kind of help with that? Okay. And again, if you have questions, put them in the chat box. Or if this is after we're streaming, feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you. And also join our Facebook group and things like that too for regular practice. Now, we're going to be breaking this down into different categories. So, firstly, starting with task achievement. So, why are we losing points for our task achievement? So, again, that task achievement category is basically how well are you answering the question. And probably the biggest issues I see with students in terms of task achievement, it usually falls into these mistakes. First thing is they're not fully answering the question. Okay. Little things like, for instance, if it says discuss both views and give the opinion, make sure you talk about both sides. If it says give advantages and disadvantages, notice that those are plurals, advantages, disadvantages. So making sure you're using plural forms, giving at least two advantages or two disadvantages. Same things with like problem solution. If it says, what are some of the problems? If it says problems, make sure you give more than one. If it says solutions, make sure you give more than one. The other side of that is if it says just problem or if it just says solution, then it's okay if you just give one. So just really paying attention to the question, making sure you're answering everything. A quick note about task one, especially for the academic chart or diagrams that you get, everything needs to be mentioned. If they give you a number, if they give you a year, if they give you a percentage, all of those things need to be included. Okay, so don't miss out on those. It's an easy way to lose points. So make sure you're including all of those things. It's key. Another reason why you could be losing points for task achievement is because you're not fully developing your answer. If you've seen my other videos where I talk about essay structure, main ideas, details, things like that, students are great at main ideas. Most students I've seen can give me 5, 6, 7, 8 different ways or different main ideas in their body paragraphs. But then if I just ask a question like, why? Why is what are you writing true? What are your examples? What are your proof? What's your proof? What's your evidence? This is where students tend to struggle. So in your body paragraphs, making sure that you're including information that explains your answer. Again, main ideas and details. If that's something you struggle with, definitely take a look at our other videos where we talk about outlining, where we talk about essay structure and things like that. Okay, those are key. That's fundamental. Um, Lastly, a sense of progression. Okay. You don't want to repeat yourself. Ideally, it feels like when you're reading an essay, it feels like going up a staircase. Each sentence leads into the next sentence, which leads into the next sentence. Everything is connected. Once you start repeating yourself or you start giving ideas that don't really feel connected to each other, you lose a sense of progression. And that's a quick way of lowering your task achievement score. So those are the biggest issues I usually saw with task achievement when I was an examiner. Our next category is coherence and cohesion. This is dealing with a couple of things. I think the first thing that students think about with coherence and cohesion is they think of transition words, things like firstly, secondly, then, however, words like that. And it's true, these words are super important. You do need them to have writing that feels connected. However, The problem I see with students is one, they have too many. Not every sentence needs a transition word. Um, so I see students that just use them too often. So it makes the paragraph feel a little disconnected, actually, has the opposite effect. The other issue I see is that students don't have enough. Okay. I would say in a body paragraph, you're dealing with a topic sentence, a main idea, a detail, another main idea, another detail. I think a good amount of transition words to have in a paragraph like that would probably be about two or three. You can add a couple more, maybe four or five maximum, but that really would be it. That's a little too much. I think two or three is a good number to have. It shows the examiner you know what you're doing, but you're not too reliant on them. The other big issue I see with coherence and cohesion is that the essay structure is not very cohesive or connected. Um, Again, when I talk about, in your intro, starting with a hook, ending the intro with a thesis statement, your body paragraphs, starting with a topic sentence, followed by a main idea, followed by a detail. This type of structure is the general essay structure that you find, especially in Western academic settings. Um, if you're not having this type of structure, if your paragraphs don't really make sense, or if you have a paragraph that's too long, or even a paragraph that's too short, these are all things that can lower your coherence and cohesion score. So those are things to consider. Paying attention to your essay structure, and again, check out our other videos that talk more about that. And I'll post some links afterwards. Next, for vocabulary. Um, what are the issues I see with vocabulary? If you're trying to get a band 7, I think one thing you really need to ask yourself on vocab is, okay, what's someone that's scoring a band 5? What kind of words are they going to use? Now, how can I separate myself from them? Okay, so if you're using a lot of words that most people learn their first or second year of learning English, then my guess is that your vocab score will probably be stuck around a band 5. At some point, you need to use some vocabulary that even beginner level students don't know. You have to use more advanced terms. You have to if you're trying to get especially a band 7. This includes phrasal verbs, this includes collocations, this includes idioms. These are all things that are very natural sounding expressions, and they have to be used if you're trying to get those higher band scores. Additionally, very advanced terms. So if you work in a specific field, for instance, a lot of my students work in the tech industry, so they know lots of English words about for tech related subjects, engineering, computer science. They know lots of words for that. Try to incorporate your areas of strength. Try to use the vocabulary you know that is advanced, so that way you can raise your vocabulary score. You're showing the examiner, look, I know all of this technical vocab. This is again a way that you can show off to the examiner that you have more advanced words. If you're only using words that someone in their first year of English can also learn, it's going to be hard to get a higher score. Another thing, especially that separates a band 6 from a band 7, is related to vocabulary and risk taking. Okay. What happens a lot for students scoring a band 6 is they'll use an advanced term, but they might use it incorrectly. It might have the wrong spelling, or it may not actually fit a specific situation. Okay, so it's an advanced word, but it's just being used incorrectly. Well, in those situations, that's almost an automatic band 6. Okay, that's the biggest difference between a band 6 and a band 7. A band 6 tries to use advanced terms but fails, and a band 7 uses advanced terms in a way that's correct or native like. So that's another thing to consider for vocab. Last thing I would suggest for vocab, spelling. If you're a bad speller and you know it, then you really need to spend some time studying spelling. I don't really have any other suggestions beyond that. You need spelling. Um, you can try things like typing games online, especially if you're taking the computer based tests. I can tell you that, I mean, at least in the US, at the schools I went to, if you were bad at spelling, then you would be punished. You would have to write the words you misspell 100 times. If you still misspell it, then 200 times. If you still misspell it, then 300 times. And that's pretty much how you learn spelling. Just writing it over and over again. I know it's not fun, but spelling is a part of your score, especially if you're using a word from the prompt. And that's something I really discourage. Try not to use too many words from the question they give you, because that will lower your score too. But if you do use a word from the question, you better spell it correctly. Okay. If the examiner sees you write a word and they find it in the question and they see you misspell it, well, yeah, you're going to be stuck at a band 6, if not lower, because there's really no excuse for that. Let's move on really quick to grammar. And again, just a quick reminder, if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat box. I'll try to respond before we head out. Talking about grammar, I guess the first thing that's pretty obvious is too many grammar mistakes. The more grammar mistakes you have, then the harder it's going to be to get a band 7. Just to give you an idea, if you're trying to score a band 7 on IELTS, that means that most of your sentences need to be correct. If most of your sentences even have one tiny grammar error, then it's more likely that you will score a 6 or a 5. Another thing is that you repeat a lot of the same structures. We all know that English is subject, verb, object oriented, but you can play with that a little bit. You can put like adverb clauses at the start of the sentence or noun phrases or things like that. So instead of always having sentences that say like the scientists found the answer, subject, verb, object, that's very standard. You consider starting with like an adjective phrase, like after months of back-breaking research, the scientists found the answer. So you start off with that little phrase at the start, and then you finish the sentence. So doing things like that to mix up your sentence structure a little bit. Sometimes what happens though is students want to mix up their sentences, but either do it too often or use some grammar structures that are a little bit awkward or unnatural. If you have too many of those, especially if it starts sounding a little bit weird, that's going to lower your score. That's probably going to keep you around a 6, maybe even a 5 if you're making mistakes in the structure. Lastly, punctuation, periods, commas, semicolons. Especially for periods, you need to know how to use a period. Okay, at the ends of your sentences, there has to be a period. Commas, there's a little bit more flexibility with. Even native speakers make mistakes with commas. You can get a band 7 with some incorrect commas, although there are occasions where a comma is more necessary than in other situations. For instance, if you're making a list, like I'll buy apples, bananas, and pears, you at least need that first comma. I personally use the second comma, but not everyone does. But I would strongly encourage using it because it makes it a little bit clearer. If you're forgetting clauses for if you're forgetting commas for clauses, then you have a little bit more flexibility. Obviously, it's still not great, but you can still get a band 7 if you're missing some of those commas. Semicolons, if you don't know how to use a semicolon, then I either suggest avoiding it completely on the test so that way you don't run into mistakes, or spend some time really studying it. A key thing with semicolons is that you need to have 2 independent clauses. Before a semicolon and after a semicolon, you need to have independent clauses. If you're not sure what an independent clause is, then maybe we shouldn't be using semicolons and just using more normal sentences. I would also suggest studying independent clauses because that's a major grammar point. All right, so those are just the highlights of the major areas where I see students making mistakes in their writing, especially with regards to task 2, although some of these points are also valid for task 1 as well, for both the academic and the general test. If you have other questions about IELTS, the grading, how it works, the difference between a 6 and a 7, again, feel free to leave some notes in the chat box or send me a message, or also, of course, join our writing group, which I will leave a link to. Thank you guys so much for your time. I will see you in a future video. Hope you have a good day and a good night and a good afternoon. You take care.